Hit you with another one of them old phenomenal shit.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Undrlvld. My name is Chris. I appreciate you all being here and for the continued support. Just want to remind you all we're about 50 subscribers away from our third giveaway. That third giveaway being probably more video games off of Steam. So yeah, if you want to continue getting this mediocre content on YouTube, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. And you'll get more Dungeons and Dragons, video game, Star Warsy, Miracle Whip, Critical Role-y content. You know, you get all the mediocre stuff here. But yeah, you just gotta subscribe and you'll keep getting it and hang out with me. That being said, let's get into this. So this is gonna be our second video in our little series to create an Archfey Warlock that I'm gonna be using in a campaign next year. But I thought, hey, you know, let's get the community involved. You know, this is my first time trying to actually make something. So let's get people involved and make this into something that everyone can use. So this patron's name is going to be Nadar, the Withering Wyrm. He's going to be a Moonstone Dragon. And like I said, he's going to be an Archfey Warlock Patron. So my idea behind this was I was going to use as many official resources as I could, not only to make it easier for myself to make this Warlock Patron, but to maybe make it easier for people to use in their campaigns, because, you know, they can say, hey, this was all made using official stuff, so work with me, DM, please work with me. So in this first step, though, I was primarily using Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, because it has a lot of charts and instructions on how to make dragons. So I was like, okay, let's make the Moonstone Dragon first. And then I'm going to use the Domain of Delight PDF you can get on the DM's Guild to, you know, implant like Archfey elements into the Moonstone Dragon and make its Domain of Delight. And in this case, as I'll kind of explain a little bit more as this video goes on, you have your typical dragon lair, Domain of Delight. It's going to be kind of one and the same in this instance. I kind of have at least what I think is a nifty idea on how to do that, and hopefully you guys think it's interesting too. And if not, by all means, if anything I say is lame, go down to the comments, you know, contribute some of your vast knowledge, and again, we'll make this into something fun and something that everyone can use. So let's get into this. I'm gonna get rid of the camera because the sun's going down and I have terrible lighting in this room, so I'm gonna kind of rely on, you know, popping up stuff and on a blank screen, and, you know, hope that works out. But don't worry, I'm working on getting, like, you know, upgraded lighting and stuff like that in the near future, so this won't be a problem. So with that being said, let's get rid of the camera in 3, 2, 1. Alright, so now that that's out of the way, like I was saying, I'm trying to make a Warlock Patron. I'm trying to make it so it's easily adapted into any campaign setting, backstory, all that jazz. So there's going to be certain things in Fizban's Treasury of Dragons that I'm going to skip over, and I'll mention it as I'm going through, like, what I'm going to be skipping over. But these are just things that I feel should probably be left up to the player in, you know, the specific instance of when they're going to be, you know, applying this patron to the character, and for the DM. So yeah, these are just things where I think, you know, the player and the DM should hash it out to work out those fine details. So you could say that this Warlock Patron, so this is kind of like setting the foundation to a Warlock Patron, and then it's something that the DM and the player work to apply to, you know, a specific instance in which you're going to be using it. So in Fizban's Treasury of Dragon, we start off in Chapter 2, Dragon Magic. So when it comes to, like, Horde Magic items and Dragon Gifts, I know people that don't like the idea of Horde items, and I know people that do like that idea. I also know people that like the idea of Dragon Gifts, or Draconic Gifts. I know people that don't. In the end, it's really up to the DM to decide whether or not they're going to use Horde Magic items or those Draconic Gifts at all. So I chose to kind of skip over these parts, I feel that this is something that, you know, the DM can kind of work with the player on, you know, not just deciding if this is something that's going to be used in the campaign, but how it'll be applicable to, you know, your specific character. So I'm kind of leaving that up to the DM to work through. Also because I feel that these would be useful tools for the DM to help push like plot points, or maybe provide the party with an item that'll help them beat the big bad or something like that. I just don't want the DM to feel like they have to use these optional mechanics. So again, that's why I'm choosing to skip over this part. Now, if people would like to know what I would do with those specific sessions, if I was like a DM, or if I did want to, like, you know, make a definite version of Nadar the Withering Wyrm, feel free to leave me a comment down below, and maybe I'll make like a separate video going over the parts that I skipped and letting people know like what I would do. I just don't want to confuse people by mashing it all together, so I'm mainly making these videos, you know, again, to make it as simplified for people as possible. Alright, so we move on to chapter 3 now, and the first little chart that we have is the dragon appearance, which, you know, this chart is basically just here to give you some unique attributes that you can apply to the appearance of your dragon, just, you know, so not every dragon is the same. And when I rolled on the dice, I got number 20. And number 20 says elemental energy matching the dragon's breath weapon, seeping out between the scales. Now in the Moonstone's instance, they have actually 2 breath weapons, one being the Dream Breath and the other being the Moonlight Breath. So in this instance, I guess the dragon would have mist and moonlight seeping out from between the scales. I think that's pretty cool, especially for kind of the theme that I'm going for with this dragon, which we'll get into a bit later. The second chart is dragon mannerisms, and in this instance I got number 10, which is burdens conversation with extensive historical context, whether or not it's relevant. This one I actually didn't roll on because I kind of skimmed through them, and that one was just too perfect for kind of what I envisioned Nadar to be like. Which again, we'll get there. We'll get into more about, you know, my vision for him, at least the baseline of it. Now the next one is dragon bonds, and in this case I actually rolled and I got number 4. Number 4 says I collect information about the worlds of the material plane, and I would love to visit another world someday, which I think is pretty cool. I feel like I could have gotten, you know, many of these options and been able to weave it into Nadar, but I feel like this is one of the better options for what I was hoping to go for. Now, for the dragon flaws and secrets, I got number 8, which is humanoids are not ready to learn the horrible cosmic truths in the books in my horde. Now this one I picked because I felt it worked really well with the dragon bond that I got. So again, it plays well into the theme and it synergizes with the dragon bond. So I thought that was pretty cool. Now for the next part, how to name your dragon, obviously Narrador, we already named the dragon, so I skipped over that part for, you know, obvious reasons. But next we move on to customizing dragons. Now for languages, you know, he's an Archfey, he's a dragon, so I kind of went with Common, Elvish, Sylvan, and Draconic. But with that last table that we rolled on, the humanoids are not ready to learn the horrible cosmic truths in the books of my horde, I actually decided to toss in deep speech as well for a language. Because, you know, when I think, you know, cosmic, I think, you know, like cosmic horror, like Lovecraftian type stuff. So I kind of feel like Deep Speech would, you know, fit in well with that. And for skills, I decided to go with yeah, when I was reading through I don't know, I think it was like the monster manual or something like that. It said perception and stealth were two very common skills that dragons were proficient in, so I went with those. And since I was kind of envisioning Narrador to be a highly intelligent dragon and a seeker of knowledge and stories, I decided to go with Arcana, Deception, and Persuasion as well for skill proficiencies. And I decided to give him expertise in history. Again, I think you'll be able to put 2 and 2 together with how I'm making him so far. That this isn't necessarily a dragon that's like meant for destruction or combat. He's definitely more of like a sage-ish kind of, a very informative figure. So, but that's not to say that he can't, you know, dish out damage or anything like that. So, you know, lifespan and all that stuff, I'm not really too worried about that. He's not exactly, you know, gonna die or anything anytime soon. Reproduction, I didn't really worry about any of that stuff. I kind of feel like those would be a bit more applicable to like the DM based on the setting and how they want to actually use Narrador, you know, because, you know, if I define him as, you know, this is the way that he rejuvenates or reproduces, or, you know, goals and lifespans and all that stuff, I feel it kind of limit how the DM can apply it to their campaign. So I'm kind of leaving that to the DM. So that brings us to spells. And kind of a big gripe that I actually have so far in with the process of making this dragon. I really don't like how Wizards of the Coast is dealing with like spellcasting when it comes to like these monsters and NPCs and stuff like that. I feel like people like variety, and so Wizards of the Coast's method of having like non-offensive spells on the spell list, and then just giving them like an attack that they can do, I kind of feel like that kind of ruins the creativity and the options that a DM can have. I also think it's kind of counterproductive that, you know, they say they want to make the game easier for players and new DMs, but then like they limit the capability of these monsters, and then kind of leave it to the DM to make their own like spell lists and stuff like that. So not a huge fan of that, and I've never tried giving a creature its own spell list before, but, you know, I tried. I think his like spell attack bonus would be 15, but that doesn't really matter because he doesn't really have any like spell attacks. But what I went with was at will, Narrador can use Fairy Fire. And I was thinking once or twice a day for each of these following spells, Narrador can use. I picked Enlarge Reduce, Moonbeam, Revivify, Conjure Fey, and Wall of Thorns. So I know it's kind of weird because, you know, he's kind of a bookworm. No pun intended, because he's, you know, the Withering Wyrm. But in highly intelligent dragon. So yeah, you know, it's kind of weird that, you know, he only has like what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spells. But I mean, it kind of seems like that's the trend, you know, like a handful of spells for all these monsters. And I kind of feel like these spells fit with him. You know, the Conjure Fey, you know, he's an Archfey, so he kind of has Fey that he can command. Moonbeam, he's a Moonstone Dragon. Enlarge, reduce, I just thought that would kind of be interesting. So yeah, I went with those spells. Other traits and actions. This was saying that, I can borrow traits and actions from other monsters and kind of add it to them. I chose Mimicry because I thought it'd be kind of funny to have this like imposing presence of this Archfey Dragon, and he kind of just, talk smack to the player, kind of mimics them. It's a little annoying, but I thought it would also kind of fit into the whole like Feywild aesthetic that seems like Wizards is trying to push, especially with like Wild Beyond the Witchlight. And I gave him 120 feet of True Sight. I just thought that'd be kind of interesting. He's full of trickery and stuff like that, but he, has the ability to make sure that people can't pull, the sheet over his head. So I thought that would be interesting. So, like I said, I was leaving a lot of these next sections, like lifespan and the goals and stuff like that. I'm kind of leaving that to the DM. But there was actually one option under Ancient Dragons that I would include with Narrador, because I don't feel like it would really shake the campaign that much, so it would still leave a lot of that power and authority to the DM. And that was number 4. And number 4 says, collect a complete set of artistic treasures, such as all the paintings of a great master, manuscripts for a famed author's entire body of writing, or every piece of jewelry made by a master artisan. And I thought, since he's a collector of like knowledge and stories and stuff like that, that would be very fitting for him personally, but it wasn't necessarily a goal that would rattle the campaign. So I guess I kind of lied before. I guess, I did pick a goal, but it's just, not really, definitely not something that's going to limit the DM at all. And for regional reversal, the next part I'm going to go over, I actually created one for that, and I think this will be like one of the only, if not the only times that I do this, just because under regional reversal, it's described in the monster manual that a dragon's presence alters the region around the dragon's lair. When the dragon dies, those effects typically end immediately or fade away over the course of several days, but a traumatic death sometimes extends negative effects throughout the region. So none of the ones listed in Fizban's Treasury of Dragons I thought was really applicable to him, but I made a simple one that's just called Domain Deterioration, which essentially is over the course of a week, since he's, has his own Domain of Delight, which also serves as kind of his lair, that it would slowly deteriorate over the course of a week. And, pretty much all organic life and whatnot that remains in the domain would slowly rot and die until the domain in itself dies. So, as much as the domain kind of influences Narrador, he's also the domain is also just as reliant on him. So I thought that would be a pretty interesting way of going about that. So next is passing the mantle, and essentially it's saying that after a dragon passes, some of its power can go to be it as its horde, or an individual. It can be taken, stuff like that. So we have to kind of determine how this dragon is going to pass on its power, and I decided to go with the first option, Investiture, which is saying a dying dragon might willingly pass on power in different ways. The most common process is for the recipient to inhale the dragon's dying breath, which often involves being subjected to at least a diminished form of the dragon's breath weapon. Gem Dragon might psionically implant a gemstone in the recipient's body that carries the dragon's power. The dragon might instead lay a claw on the recipient or bequeath a piece of treasure as an embodiment of the transferred power. So I went with that because I felt, he, would obviously want to pass on his power to someone that he felt was worthy. But at the same time, I kind of feel like Body and Blood, the second option, should be applicable to pretty much like every dragon. And that's saying when a dragon dies a violent death, the dragon's power might linger in the corpse for a short time. Drinking or bathing in the dragon's blood, sleeping in sleeping in the carcass, or consuming the dragon's heart, brain, eyes, breath-producing organ, or muscle can be an effective way of claiming the fallen creature's magical might. So yeah, I kind of feel like, just as the dragon can give the power, it can be taken away by, I would say by force, but it's dead. So yeah, I kind of feel like those would be the two ways that you would get power from this particular dragon. And a reward for this, as it says in Fizban's, it'd pretty much be a charm or blessing from the DMG, a supernatural gift from Mythic Odyssey of Theros, a dark gift from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, or a draconic gift from Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. That would obviously be up to the DM to decide. I feel like it'd be very situational. And I kind of feel for these next parts, be it Undeath or Echoes Across the Worlds, Gods and Religion, Dragon Organizations, all that jazz, I kind of feel like that should be up to the DM. Like, I don't want to dictate a specific organization tied to this dragon, but then again, that wouldn't even necessarily make sense for him. So I feel like a lot of these should be up to the DM, because I know even like Echoes Across the Worlds, I know people that like the idea of dragons having these echoes, and I know people that really don't like that. So I feel like that's another thing that should be up to the DM. I don't feel like that's something that should be forced on them. So the next part we would go to is followers. So dragon relationships, basically the relationship between the dragon and people that it's affiliated with, which I also feel in this particular instance, since this would be an Archfey Patron, I feel this would also be applicable to, the Narrador, the Archfey, and, whoever the player's warlock is. So in this instance, I would go with, let me find it, parental figure. Some dragons treat their followers and minions like children. These followers might be a dragon's devoted dragon or half-dragon offspring, but it's more likely that these minions are a family the dragon has adopted out of generosity, compassion, or manipulation. Unlike most other relationships between dragons and followers, this one is primarily about the well-being and advancement of the followers, not the dragon. Dragons are notoriously egotistical even when they are benevolent, but some make sacrifices for weaker creatures they see as family, regardless of their exact relationship to the creatures. To outsiders, dragons in this sort of relationship might be mistaken for pets or servitors, but dragons never forget their own power and importance, even when helping other creatures, and dragons' children might face serious consequences if they forget who's in charge. I feel like that's perfect, especially since we're going for the making this dragon into a warlock patron. I feel like this is perfect. It fits in well. It fits in really, really well. So next up, we have charts for like relationship and adventures, leaving that to the DM for sure. And what was next? Oh, I did look at the dragon minions section, and I actually decided to that a lot of the minions, or people that you would find in this dragon's Domain of Delight would have telepathic. Well, it would have the option telepathic minion. The minion and its master can communicate telepathically with each other as long as they are on the same plane of existence. So I thought that would just be, you know, since the dragon treats its minions like family, and I kind of feel like, you know, they're close, and, you know, what's closer than, you know, having a telepathic connection. Dragon encounters, again, I'm not making this patron with the mindset of having a party like fight it or anything. So I feel like this, you know, again would be a DM thing. You know, and, you know, dragon adventures. I mean, this is a warlock patron. This isn't exactly you know, the focus of the campaign. I mean, if someone wants to make this dragon like the focus of the campaign, by all means, add whatever you want to it. But that's just not the purpose that I had intended in wanting to make this warlock patron. So with that, the rest of chapter 2 would essentially be, well, I mean, the rest of chapter 3 would essentially be kind of like up to the DM at that point. So we move on to layers and hordes. So again, like I said, my intention with this was to have the Dragon's Lair and Domain of Delight be one and the same. So a lot of these elements, like when I'm speaking on, you know, layer stuff, in your mind have it set that, you know, this is going to be applicable to the Domain of Delight essentially as a whole. So with that being said, layer location, I went with number 2. The area is a wild magic zone. Whenever a creature casts a spell of first level or higher, or activates a magic item, roll a d10. On a 1, roll on the wild magic surge table in the player's handbook. I thought that just made a lot of sense. I thought that'd be pretty cool too. Especially because I had envisioned the Domain of Delight not necessarily being like vast, but having a lot of depth. So, you know, it will definitely take time to travel through to find Narrador, you know, if anyone went to that Domain of Delight. So yeah, you might run into some things here and there, and, you know, you cast a spell. I thought it'd be cool to have something like that. Now, move on to regional effects, which, you know, makes sense would have in a Domain of Delight. But in this particular case, you know, in the book, you know, it's basically the area around the dragon's lair is altered by the dragon's presence. But, you know, just think, you know, Domain of Delight, and this is going to apply to that. So terrain changes, I went with exposing terrain. The terrain within 6 miles of the lair actively works to foil stealth, giving creatures other than the dragon disadvantage on dexterity stealth checks. Leaves change color to contrast with those trying to hide among them. Branches move to reveal creatures, fog clears, and so on. So again, it's like kind of having that kind of pseudo-symbiotic relationship between Narrador, the Archfey, and his Domain of Delight, which is why, you know, when he dies, essentially the Domain of Delight dies with him. Weather changes, I went with pleasant weather. And that is, the weather within 6 miles of the dragon's lair is always sunny and pleasantly warm during the day. Rain falls only at night, and dew waters the ground in the early morning. So, yeah. It's a nice place to live, which makes it a little more tragic when, you know, he dies and everything dies with him. Water changes, I went with beguiling water. I mean, you know English is hard for me, so I mean, maybe I mispronounced that. But anyway, when a creature drinks from a stream or lake within 1 mile of the dragon's lair, the creature must make a wisdom saving throw against a DC equal to 8 plus the dragon's proficiency bonus plus charisma modifier. On a failed save, the creature is charmed by the dragon for 24 hours. On a successful save, the creature is immune to this effect for the next 24 hours. I thought that kind of fit in well with like the whole Fae theme that I'm kind of going for. Now moving on to changes to creatures, I went with pervasive influence. People dwelling within 12 miles of the dragon's lair develop personality traits inspired by the dragon, heightened suspicion, greed, plasticity, and stuff like that. Individuals manifest these tendencies in different ways and to different degrees. If the dragon dies or leaves the area, these traits fade over 1d10 days. I kind of felt like that synergized with the whole idea of, when or if Narrador dies, the domain dies with it. Thus, kind of his influence would die with it as well. So I thought that all kind of worked pretty well together. And for planar connections, I went with windows to other worlds. Holes or passageways within the lair allow communication or travel between different worlds in the material plane. Now, that I thought was cool because, as I'll kind of I might discuss it later. Basically in a Moonstone Dragon's lair, essentially the lair is supposed to be like kind of on like multiple planes via like portals and stuff like that. I didn't go with it for Narrador because the Domain of Delight is his lair, but I thought that this would kind of fit thematically with that idea as well. This next part of Windows to the Other World, though, would be optional based on if the DM decided to go with it or not. And that is, the dragon uses these to converse with echoes on other worlds. Not everyone's going to want to use the whole echo thing, but I still thought, since he's a purveyor of knowledge and stories and whatnot, having kind of a little spyglass into various worlds in the material plane kind of made sense. And, like I said, it kind of fits thematically with the Moonstone based on what I learned about their lairs. So next we move on to dragon magic. Regional effects sometimes give dragons unusual magical capabilities. I went with name alerts. If the dragon's name is spoken within 1 mile of its lair, the dragon instantly knows it and hears everything said within 10 feet of that spot for the next 5 minutes. Again, I thought it fit well into the whole symbiotic relationship I have kind of set up with Narrador and its lair / Domain of Delight. So I thought that worked pretty well. And cosmic alterations, I went with starry scene. At night, the stars above the dragon's lair are surrounded by faint outlines of creatures that begin to move and act out scenes from the dragon's dreams, including the dragon. It's a Moonstone Dragon, purveyor of stories. I thought that just made the most sense and seemed the most interesting to me. Now we have lair actions. Obviously there's going to be a bit more to it than that, but they have a section for it right here. I went with lair rejuvenation. The dragon regains hit points equal to the number of hit dice it has by drawing on the magical energy suffusing its lair. Again, symbiotic relationship. That just made the most sense to me to include that. And the dragon's hordes, we've all kind of discussed this a bit. This should be up to the DM. I don't want to really dictate how rewarding or unrewarding the treasures in Narrador's Domain of Delight would be. That should be kind of up to the DM. So I kind of skipped over that, like horde quirks and stuff like that. What's in a horde, like these sections, creating a horde, all that stuff, up to the DM. Again, I want this to be something that is fun for everyone, not just me, not just any players that want to use this Warlock Patron, but also for the DM. Everyone should have input on this, and everyone should have creative influence on it. The next we move on to Chapter 5, the Draconomicon. So, this part we go to the Moonstone Dragon section, which if for whatever reason someone is following along with me and kind of as I'm going through all of this, this would be on page 130, kind of in the back of the list. So Moon Dragon personality traits, I went with number 2. I've been known to throw caution to the wind when in pursuit of new items for my horde. Like I said, purveyor of basically knowledge and stories, so he will throw caution to the wind if there's like a good storybook out there or something, or some hidden knowledge that he's never heard of before. Moonstone Dragon ideals. I went with inspiration. Great are history's artists and creators, but greater still are those who inspire them. Again, he's all about the stories and the knowledge. I thought that just kind of fit with him the best. And the next section, Moonstone Dragon Adventures. Again, I feel like I'm a broken record, but that's mainly up to the DM in that particular instance. So Moonstone Dragon Lairs. Now, as I said, the Domain of Delight is essentially Narrador's lair. So as such, the Domain of Delight is going to have aspects of green, black, and fairy dragon lairs that you find in Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. It even says it in the book that, Moonstone Dragon lair features found on page 132. It says that, the lair has elements of black and green dragons. I'm adding in fairy dragon because, Fey, Moonstone, Fey Wild, just kind of makes sense to me. And, but since it's essentially a Domain of Delight, and because this video is going on a lot longer than I thought, I'm going to include those details in the next video. That next video being when I go through the Domain of Delight PDF found on the DM's Guild and apply that stuff to Narrador. So yeah, I'm going to be going over that in the next video. Under Moonstone Dragon Treasures, I did actually pick something. I mean, normally I would say in this situation, up to the DM, but there was actually one option I thought was very appropriate. It's number 8. A vast bookshelf full of dream journals written by creatures the dragon has befriended over the years. The dragon has each entry illustrated by a different celebrated artist, making the library one of the largest art collections in the world. I thought that just fit too perfect. Too perfect with Narrador, and it's still simplistic enough that it doesn't really take away from the creative possibilities of the DM or any other player that wants to use him. So I decided to stick with that. So next, and I think the final part of this, is the Bestiary section, and you'll find the Moonstone Dragon on page 211. It's like way in the back. And obviously the Moonstone Dragon's lair actions, regional effects, that's all going to be applied when I create its Domain of Delight. And the stat blocks for the Ancient Moonstone Dragon, which is, what I'll be basing Narrador stat block on, will obviously have to be adjusted once I make him into an Archfey. And, I include, it's his custom spellcasting features and stuff like that. So it'll obviously have to be adjusted a little bit. I'm not sure if I should really make, stat block wise, be it his hit points or anything like that. I don't know if I should make it stronger. I mean, it's an Ancient Moonstone Dragon. I'm not trying to make him into a Tarask or anything like that. But if anyone has any input on, what you think in Archfey Warlock Patron stat block should be, feel free to leave me a comment down below. But with that being said, that finishes this first part of like the actual creative process into Narrador, the Withering Wyrm. I had a lot of fun doing this, going through the charts, and it kind of got the creative juices flowing. I was actually going to do a whole section on, like, you know, creating each dragon lair, then creating the domain of delight, and then kind of infusing it all together. But in all honesty, I thought it would make a little bit more sense to include the dragon lair features into the domain of delight just directly and having it be one entity. I just didn't want to confuse people or confuse myself. But yeah, I'm probably going about this all wrong. If any professional homebrewers out there, anyone who has some knowledge to share with me, feel free to leave a comment down below. Tell me what I'm doing right. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. Give me any input, advice, contributions, anything and everything. Leave in the comments down below. I would greatly appreciate it. And yeah, I appreciate you all taking the time to watch this video, and I'm looking forward to finishing this Warlock Patron with all of you, and you know, maybe I'll get some custom art made for him in the end of all of this, so we all have a little something special with our first creation together. But again, thank you everyone. Have yourselves a good day, and I'll catch you in the next one.